You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium, available on Apple Podcast, Substack, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean, and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about the disappearance of Maura Murray. So it's over to you now, Mark, for this week's Missing Conundrum.
Maura Murray, who was a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, USA, disappeared on the 9th of February in 2004, almost 22 years ago to the day of the debut of this podcast, after a single vehicle crash on Route 112 near Woodsville in the town of Haverhill in New Hampshire. According to reports, it appeared that earlier that same afternoon she had emailed her professor and her work supervisor to say that she would be away for a week due to a death in the family, but at a later date this was an event that, according to her relatives, had not actually occurred. At 7:27 p.m. that same day, a local resident reported seeing Maura's car off the road near their home, but despite this, when the police arrived at the scene at 7:46 p.m, just 19 minutes later, Maura Murray was gone, leaving behind her vehicle and her personal belongings. The investigation into Maura Murray's disappearance has been both extensive and long-running, with the police initially considering the possibility that she had chosen to leave voluntarily. But in 2009, the case was transferred to the New Hampshire's Cold Case Unit, with it now being treated as a suspicious missing person investigation. There have been multiple searches and public appeals, along with many reviews of the case that have been conducted over the years, but as of yet there are still no confirmed sightings or definitive leads that have emerged, with Maura's disappearance having drawn significant immediate attention, widespread public speculation, along with extensive online discussions. However, despite all this exposure, she has not been seen since, and her whereabouts remain unknown. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this unsolved mystery episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I am a medium, a ufologist, a true crime buff, and a man with a very dark and disturbed sense of humour who found out that his addiction to cheese was only mild. But just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every week, usually on a Friday night, though occasionally on a weekend, allowing for bank holidays and busy weeks, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the Unexplained banner. These subjects include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of different paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, serial killers, the darker side of some past celebrities, and the occasional missing person that often goes unnoticed. So, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review or an opinion of the episode subject that I can reply to, a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell. Or, if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, why not give us a like and follow? And if you get a few minutes, perhaps you might like to check out my social media groups and pages, which include Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, which are filled daily with all things unexplained and crime. I will put the links to some of my socials in the description. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the mystery surrounding the disappearance of Maura Murray. And this week's necessary disclaimer: Well, as you can see by the title of the show, I will be discussing missing people, mainly a young woman, which may be upsetting to some. So, as usual, you listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, made me wonder the other day that if Whole Foods sells sliced apples, is it false advertising? But anyway, enough of this silliness, and let's get back to the story. Just to give you fair warning here, listeners, I have gone into quite a lot of details regarding the times and dates during the course of Maura Murray's disappearance, so do brace yourselves for a bit of a bumpy ride. Maura Murray, who was raised in an Irish Catholic household, was born on the 4th of May in 1982 in Brockton, Massachusetts, in the good old US of A, and was the fourth child of Frederick and Laurie Murray. She has an older brother named Fred, two older sisters named Kathleen and Julie, and a younger half-brother named Kurt, and when she was just 6 years old, Maura Murray's parents divorced, so after which she then lived primarily with her mother. Maura Murray graduated from the Hanson Regional High School in Hanson, Massachusetts, where she was a star athlete on the school's track team, and then she was later accepted into the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York, where she studied chemical engineering for 3 semesters. However, after a time, she believed that West Point was probably not a good fit for her, so she then transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst, which is otherwise known as UMass Amherst, after her freshman year, to study nursing. In the November of 2003, 3 months prior to her disappearance, Maura Murray admitted to using a stolen credit card in order to buy some food from several local restaurants, with the charge continuing through to the December of that same year, but was dismissed after 3 months for good behaviour. On the evening of the 5th of February in 2004, while she was on duty at her security job on the UMass Amherst campus, Maura Murray spoke on the phone with her older sister Kathleen, discussing Kathy's relationship problems with her fiancé. At around 10:30 p.m, while still on her shift, Maura Murray suddenly broke down in tears, and when her supervisor arrived at her desk, she said that Maura was, and I quote, "just completely zoned out, no reaction at all. She was unresponsive." So, as a way of pacifying her, eventually at 1:20 a.m, the supervisor then escorted Maura back to her dorm room, and when her supervisor asked her what was wrong, Maura replied, with just 2 words, and I quote,
"My sister."
It is worth me pointing out here with the exact contents of this phone call between Maura and Kathleen in 2004 would remain unknown until the October of 2017, when Kathleen publicly explained the conversation. You see, according to reports, Kathleen was an alcoholic who had been discharged from a rehabilitation clinic on that evening. But on her way home, her fiancé, not being the brightest flame in the fire, decided to take her to a liquor store, which unfortunately caused a relapse. Pillock. Sorry. Shouldn't judge. On the Saturday of the 7th of February in 2004, Maura Murray dropped her father, Fred, off at his motel room, and then, borrowing her father's car, a Toyota Corolla, she returned to campus to attend a dorm party, with Fred Murray later telling investigators that he and Moira first went car shopping that afternoon and then later went to dinner with a friend of his daughter's. Moira arrived at the dawn party at 10:30 p.m. and then left at 2:30 a.m. the next morning on the Sunday of the 8th of February, and then at 3:30 a.m. whilst en route back to her father's motel, she suddenly struck a guardrail on the Massachusetts Route 9 in Hadley, causing nearly $10,000 worth of damage to her father's car, which is the equivalent to $17,000 in 2026. The responding officer to the crash did write an accident report. However, there does appear to be no documentation of any field sobriety tests that may have been carried out, and so it appears that instead Maura Murray was just driven by law enforcement directly to her father's motel, where she stayed in his room for the rest of that morning. I think it's worth me pointing out here that while Moira was staying in her father's room, at 4:49 a.m. there was a cell phone call placed to her boyfriend, Bill Roche, from her father's phone. However, the participants and contents of the actual phone call still remain unknown. Later that morning, on the Sunday of the 8th of February, her father, Fred, learned that the damage to his vehicle would be covered by his auto insurance, and so he was able to rent a car and drop Moira off at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, again otherwise known as UMass Amherst, and then depart back to his home in Connecticut. And once home, at 11:30 p.m. that night, he called his daughter to remind her to obtain the accident forms from the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles, and they then agreed to talk again on the following night, meaning the Monday of the 9th of February, to discuss the forms and fill out the insurance claim via the phone. After this first short break, in part 2 we will look at Maura Murray's activities leading to her disappearance, along with a few possible sightings.
Ghost Planet Network, broadcasting from the other side, ready to tune into terror? The Ghost Planet Network is your new home for original paranormal content, streaming straight from beyond the veil. We have got it all: spine-tingling stories, chilling documentaries, and real paranormal investigations from the world's most haunted hotspots. Perfect for believers, skeptics, and anyone who just loves a good scare. Join the paranormal TV revolution. Get unlimited access for just £12 per year. Tune in now. Email us at neil.hapra@gmail.com to sign up. That is neil.haprc@gmail.com.
Shortly after midnight on the Monday of the 9th of February, Maura Murray used her personal computer in order to search MapQuest for the directions to the Berkshires and Burlington located in Vermont. And the first reported contact Maura had with anyone was again on the 9th at 1 p.m. when she emailed her boyfriend named Bill Roche saying, and I quote,
"I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking too much of anyone. I promise to call today, though. Love you, Moira."
Moira also, around that same time, made a phone call inquiring about renting a condominium, at Bartlett, New Hampshire's Condo Association, which was an area that her and her family had vacationed many times in the past. However, as it transpired, in the end, the owner did not rent the condo out to her, and at 1:13 p.m. that same day, she then called a fellow nursing student. However, the reasons for this call remain unknown. Then, on the same afternoon of the 9th at 1:24 p.m, Moira then emailed a work supervisor of the nursing school faculty saying that she would be out of town for a week due to a death in her family, adding that she would contact them when she returned home. However, according to her family, no such death had ever taken place. At 2:05 p.m, again on the 9th, Maura Murray called a number which provided recorded information about booking hotels in Stowe, in Vermont. Then at 12:18 p.m, she telephoned her boyfriend and left a voicemail about a minute long, promising him they would talk later. She then, according to reports, packed her clothing, her toiletries, her college textbooks, along with her birth control pills into her black 1996 Saturn sedan vehicle. Later, when Maura Murray's campus room was searched, the campus police discovered that most of her belongings were already packed in boxes, and any pictures that were hanging on the walls were removed. And although it is not clear as to whether she packed them that day, law enforcement at the time said that she more than likely packed between the Sunday night and the Monday morning. And not only that, but on top of one of the boxes was a printed email to Moira's boyfriend indicating that there was possibly some trouble in their relationship. At around 3:30 p.m, again on the 9th of February, Maura Murray then drove off the campus in her black 1996 Saturn sedan vehicle, as classes at UMass Amherst had been cancelled that day due to a snowstorm. And then at 3:40 p.m, she withdrew $280 from an ATM with closed-circuit footage showing that she was alone. Moira then purchased about $40 worth of alcoholic beverages, which included Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua and vodka, along with a box of Franzia wine from a nearby liquor store, with the security footage showing again that she was alone. And at some point in the day, she also picked up the accident report forms from the Registry of Motor Vehicles, eventually leaving Amherst between 4 and 5 p.m. that day, presumably via Interstate 91 North. And, according to her phone records, she also called to check her voicemail at 4:37 p.m, which is the last recorded use of her cell phone. And just to add to the intrigue, to date there is no indication that she had informed anyone of her destination, or any evidence that she had actually chosen one. Sometime after 7 p.m. on the 9th of February, a Woodsville, New Hampshire resident suddenly heard a loud thump outside her home, and upon looking through her window, she noticed a car up against the snowbank along the New Hampshire Route 112, which is also known as Wild Ammonoosuc Road, on the sharp corner adjacent to her home, with the car itself pointing west on the eastbound side of the road, to which the resident then at 7:27 p.m. telephoned the Grafton County Sheriff's Department to report the accident. A passing motorist, a school bus driver who lived nearby, upon seeing the damaged car, as well as a young woman walking around the vehicle, then decided to stop at the scene. He noticed that although the young woman was not bleeding or visibly injured, she looked considerably cold and was shivering. So, obviously, with them both not realising that the police were already on their way, he then offered to call for help. However, the young woman asked him not to call the police, with one police report saying that she actually pleaded with him and assured him that she had already called AAA, although AAA has no record of any such call. The bus driver, knowing there was no cellular reception in that particular area, then continued to drive to his home and call the police himself, with this call being received by the Sheriff's Department at 7:43 p.m. And although the bus driver was unable to see Maura Murray's car... Sorry, that was a dog sneezing in the background there. Sorry, I'll do that one again. And although the bus driver was unable to see Maura Murray's car while he made the call, he did notice several cars pass on the road before the police arrived. Another local resident who was driving home from work that evening claimed that she passed by the scene of the accident along the New Hampshire Route 112, again otherwise known as Wild Amonasuk Road at around 7:37 p.m. and saw a police SUV parked face to face with Moira's car, also claiming that when she pulled over briefly, presumably as some sort of offer of help, she did not see anyone inside or outside either vehicle, and so she decided to continue home. However, just to confuse things a little more, this witness statement contradicts the official police log, which has the Haverhill Police Department arriving 9 minutes later at 7:46 p.m. According to the official police log, at the aforementioned time of 7:46 p.m, when the Haverhill police officer arrived at the scene of the accident, the female driver had disappeared, saying that no one was inside or around the car. He also noted that the car itself, meaning the black 1996 Saturn sedan, had impacted a tree on the driver's side of the vehicle, severely damaging the left headlight and pushing the car's radiator into the fan, rendering it inoperable, I think that's right, along with the car's windshield being cracked on the driver's side and both airbags having been deployed. The Haverhill police officer also noticed, both on the inside and outside of the car, some red stains that looked to be red wine, and on closer inspection of the vehicle interior, he found an empty beer bottle, along with a damaged box of Franzia wine on the rear seat, and in addition to this, he also found a AAA card issued to Murray, some blank accident report forms, gloves, compact discs, makeup, diamond jewellery, driving directions to Burlington, Moira's favourite stuffed animal, and a publication called Not Without Peril, which is a book about mountain climbing in the White Mountains. Missing items from the immediate scene included Maura Murray's debit card, credit cards and cell phone, none of which, I hasten to add, have been located or used since her disappearance. The police later reported some of the bottles of alcohol which Maura had purchased earlier that day on the 9th of February was also missing. The responding officer, along with the aforementioned bus driver, then spent some time driving around the area searching for Maura, and just before 8 p.m. that same evening, the emergency medical services, along with a fire truck, arrived to clear the scene. By 8:49 p.m, the car had been towed to a local garage, and at about 9:30 p.m, the responding officer left. At noon the next day, on the Tuesday of the 10th of February, less than 24 hours after her last confirmed sighting, the authorities would refer to Maura Murray as simply a missing person case, on the assumed belief that she may have wanted to disappear voluntarily, with this speculation being based on her travel preparations, of which she had confided nothing about to her friends or family, along with no obvious evidence of any foul play. As a recap on the story so far, it is worth me noting at this point how the journalist John McGee, writing for the Quincy, Massachusetts Patriot Ledger, summarised at the time of her disappearance the Maura Murray incident, and I quote, "At a hairpin turn, she went off the road. Her car hit a tree. At that point, a person came along who was driving a bus. It was a neighbour. He asked her if she needed help. She refused. About 10 minutes later, police showed up to the scene and Maura Murray was gone." After this second short break in part 3, we will look at the initial investigation, along with the continuing search efforts that have been made regarding Maura Murray's disappearance.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07 852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk. Or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
At 12:36 p.m. on the Tuesday of the 10th of February, a be on the lookout report for Maura Murray was issued as wearing a dark coat, jeans and a black backpack at the time of her disappearance, and a voicemail was left at 3:20 p.m. on her father Fred Murray's home answering machine, stating that his daughter's car had been found abandoned. However, as Fred was working out of state, he did not receive this call. Later that same day at 5 p.m, one of Moira's older sisters contacted her father to tell him of the situation, which then led to Fred himself contacting the Haverhill police. Law enforcement then informed Fred that if his daughter was not reported safe by the following morning, then the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department would start a search. However, it was just 17 minutes later at 5:17 p.m. when the Haverhill Police Department finally referred to Maura Murray as missing. The next day at 8 a.m. on the Wednesday of the 11th of February, and Fred, having already arrived at dawn with his family, because, as I should imagine, they probably didn't get much sleep over the previous night, then, along with the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department and various other volunteers, began their search for Maura. By using a tracking dog, they were able to follow a scent from one of Maura Murray's gloves 100 yards east from where the vehicle had initially been discovered, but unfortunately, and after a time, the dog lost the scent, which suggested to the police that she had left the area in another vehicle. At 5 p.m, Maura Murray's boyfriend, Bill Roche, along with his mother and father, arrived in Haverhill. The boyfriend was interrogated, first in private and then questioned along with his parents, and at 7 p.m, 2 hours later that same day, the police came to the conclusion that Maura had come to the area either to run away or to attempt suicide. However, her family believed this was highly unlikely. About a week after Maura Murray's disappearance, her father, Fred Murray, and her boyfriend, Bill Roche, were interviewed by CNN's American Morning in a plea for any information regarding the missing 21-year-old. And at the same time, the Murray family also expanded their search into Vermont after being somewhat dismayed that the authorities over there had not been informed of Maura's disappearance. 10 days after Murray's disappearance, and although missing person cases are normally overseen by the local and state police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined in with the inquiry by interviewing relatives from Massachusetts. Also, the Haverhill Police Chief announces that the search is now nationwide, and the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department conducts a second ground and air search, only this time by using a helicopter with a thermal imaging camera along with cadaver and tracking dogs. One of the items that was found during this second search was a ripped pair of women's underwear, which was located on a secluded trail near French Pond Road on the 26th of February by Murray's older sister. However, DNA testing found that the underwear did not belong to Maura. At the end of February, the police returned all the items that were originally found in Maura's car to her family, and on the 2nd of March, the family checked out of their motel, exhausted from the search, although her father, Fred Murray, did return nearly every weekend to continue looking. But a month later, in April, the Haverhill police informed Fred of complaints against him for trespassing on private property. Come catch a break. Come forward just a couple of years, and in 2006 the New Hampshire League of Investigators, which comprises of 10 retired police officers and detectives, along with the Molly Bish Foundation, which provides victim advocacy and services and support, started working on the Maura Murray case, with Tom Shamshak, who was a former police chief and a member of the Licensed Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts, saying of the incident, and I quote, "It appears that this is something beyond a mere missing person case. Something ominous could have happened here." In 2007, the Arkansas group Let's Bring Them Home offered a $75,000 reward for information that could solve Murray's disappearance. In 2009, Maura Murray's case was given to the New Hampshire's Cold Case Division, with the authorities managing it as a suspicious missing persons case, and in 2010, Fred Murray, Maura's father, publicly criticised the police investigation for treating the disappearance to his daughter as a missing persons case and not a criminal matter, calling on the FBI to join the investigation, even though it was already claimed in the February of 2009 that the investigation was still active, saying that, and I quote, "We don't know if Moira is a victim, but the state is treating it as a potential homicide. It may be a missing persons case, but it's being handled as a criminal investigation." In 2014, on the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, and the Associated Attorney General, Jeffrey Streslin, stated that, and I quote, "We haven't had any credible sightings of Moira since the night she disappeared." And in an article published in the New York Daily News, it was also reported that Fred Murray not only believed that his daughter had been abducted the night of her disappearance, but he also believed that she was dead. On the 9th of February in 2017, being the 13th anniversary of Moira's disappearance, the Associate Attorney General, Jeffrey Streslin, wrote in an email to the Boston Globe saying, and I quote, "It is still an open case with periods of activity and at times it does go dormant, and that sadly," and again I quote, "there are no new updates to share at this time." In the January of 2022, the FBI issued a national alert in Maura Murray's case and created a violent criminal apprehension profile which would allow multiple law enforcement agencies to share information regarding her case. And later that same year, in the July of 2022, law enforcement in New Hampshire initiated a search in the towns of Llandaff and Easton as part of an ongoing investigative process. And in the February of 2024, on the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, the New Hampshire officials released an age progression photograph of Maura Murray, showing what she may have showing what she might have looked like at that time. Maura Murray's disappearance has been cited as, and I quote, "the first crime mystery of the social media age, generating speculation from both the media and the public alike, with the main focus being on the internet in online forums and message boards." The journalist who wrote for the Boston magazine in 2014, called Bill Jensen, noted at the time, and I quote, "Now at least online, it often seems as if there's no such thing as a cold case, but when Maura Murray disappeared, the social web was in its infancy. There was no YouTube and no Twitter. On the day Moira went missing, Facebook was only 5 days old, and so you can read the history of her case as a parable account of the evolution online sleuthing." Back in 2005, active discussions of Maura Murray's disappearance was documented on the website called websleuth.com. And in 2017, Facebook and MySpace pages were created dedicated in helping to find her, with the aforementioned Bill Jensen also saying in 2014, and I quote, "On the internet, Moira's disappearance is the perfect obsession, a puzzle of clues that offers a tantalising illusion, and if the right armchair detective connects the right dots, maybe the unsolvable can be solved. And so every day the case attracts new recruits, analysing and dissecting and reconstructing the details of her story with a Warren Commission-like fervour." Like all my podcasts, I try to be thorough with my research, And although I know I'm not perfect at it, I try my best. And with this show, I tried to give you as much information as I could without overstretching it, as I'm not a big fan of very long shows. There is a lot more information regarding this case, and there is also no shortage of documentaries and podcasts, both audio and visual. But if you are interested in finding out a lot more information regarding Maura Murray, then I highly recommend the podcast by her sister Julie Murray called Media Pressure, as it not only tells you of Maura's personality, but it also goes into depth about her family and everything leading up to her disappearance. It also discusses how the family have both struggled and drawn strength from each other over the years in the battle to find out what happened to their missing sibling. I'll repeat the name again, Media Pressure, and it is available from wherever you usually get your podcasts from.
If you have any information regarding Maura Murray's disappearance, you can reach out to the Maura Murray's family via email at moira.murraypress@gmail.com. Or alternatively, you can call either the New Hampshire State Police on 603 271 2663 or the FBI on 800 634 4097. And for additional information, you can visit the Uncovered website, which collects data on cold cases and presents contact information for people with new clues. Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 190, we are going to be looking at what happened to Barry Sherman. On the 15th of December in 2017, Barry Sherman, who was a prominent Canadian businessman and philanthropist, was found dead in his home. The couple, Barry and Honey Sherman, were discovered hanging by belts from a railing surrounding their indoor pool, with the cause of death being determined to be a ligature neck compression or strangulation. However, there were no signs of forced entry into their home, and so the case has remained unsolved, with no suspects or persons of interest named since the murder occurred.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations of all the names and places, though, was all mine. The voices in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes, and Denise Poolar, and my dog, of course. With special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at Ghost Planet Network, and of course a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast, but if you do know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters, and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I'll see what I can do. I'll also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end credits of the podcast if they're happy for me to do so, of course. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. No AI was used or harmed in the making of this or any other episode of Mark's Unexplained World. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.